seems to be getting bad there, whether they should come back down.
K2 gives you a very small weather window to climb. And if you're not 100% ready as well, then the mountain's going to kill you.
In the Karakoram range of Pakistan, bordering China, stands K2, the world's second highest peak. Altitude is the only category where this impressive mountain does not occupy the absolute number one position. Standing at 8,611 meters, or 28,251 feet, it is widely considered to be the world's most difficult mountain to climb. Climbers regard K2 as the ultimate achievement in mountaineering, and that's for good reason. More people have been to outer space than have stood on the summit of K2. In the 122 years of expeditions, from 1902 to June 2024, less than 400 people have ever reached the summit of this majestic mountain and lived to talk about it. In 2022, K2 passed Annapurna in terms of the fatality rate to claim the title, the world's most deadly mountain. In this two-part miniseries, we will not only provide you with valuable insight into this magnificent mountain, but also take you on an expedition, from the very beginning, all the way up to the summit, and afterward, accompany a superhuman athlete on his descent back to the base camp. Over the years, K2 has earned several nicknames, given by explorers and mountaineers, who had not only reached the location of today's base camp, and looked up toward the towering peak, but also tried to reach the summit. Some of them failed and returned, and some others lost their lives, and remain in memory still on the mountain. And of course, some distinguished climbers eventually managed to accomplish that formidable achievement. The different names and nicknames, surveyors, explorers, and mountaineers called the mountain, reached cult status. Let's have a closer look in chronological order. The Great Trigonometrical Survey of India was a project that aimed to carry out a survey across the Indian subcontinent with scientific precision. It was begun in 1802 and lasted 69 years until completed in 1871. The project also covered the Karakoram range of today's Pakistan. Thomas Montgomery made the first survey of the Karakoram from Mount Haramuk, some 210 kilometers or 130 miles to the south, and sketched the two most prominent peaks, labeling them K1 and K2. Montgomery mistakenly designated the 7,821 meters or 25,660 feet Gasherbrum as the highest mountain in Karakoram and named it K1. Gasherbrum is as the crow flies, only 20.2 miles or 32.5 kilometers away from K2. However, trekking between the two mountains requires several days, on rugged terrain on the surface of the Baltoro Glacier, in close vicinity of three other 8,000-meter peaks, namely, Gasherbrum I, Broad Peak, and Gasherbrum II. Worth mentioning as a side note is the Peak 15 in the Himalayas. Geographer Sir George Everest was Surveyor General of India, and he was in charge of this mega surveying project between 1830 and 1843. In 1865, the Royal Geographical Society renamed Peak 15, which was at the time only recently identified as the world's highest peak, to Mount Everest in his honor. K2 earned the name, the Impossible Mountain, after an Italian expedition in 1909, led by Prince Luigi Amadeo, Duke of the Abruzzi. The Duke's team reached an elevation of around 6,250 meters or 20,510 feet on the southeast spur, but due to the route's steepness and difficulty, they decided to abandon the attempt. After trying and failing to find a feasible alternative route on the West Ridge and the Northeast Ridge, the Duke declared that K2 would never be climbed. Ironically, the southeast spur, better known as the Abruzzi Spur, named after the Duke of Abruzzi, has been for years K2's most popular route to the summit, with 75% of climbers tackling this pass. Another famous nickname, the Savage Mountain, was given after an interview by George Irving Bell, who was one of the climbers on the 1953 American Karakoram expedition. Bell told reporters, "It's a savage mountain that tries to kill you." The American Karakoram expedition, led by Charles Houston, managed to climb the Abruzzi spur up to an altitude of around 7,750 meters and camped for the night near a landmark called the Shoulder. However, severe weather and the health condition of the team members, especially Art Gilkey's sickness with blood clots in his veins, forced them to give up their summit attempt. They hardly survived the descent. First, a mass fall occurred as the climbers began the traverse. Pete Schawning quickly wrapped the rope around his shoulders and an ice axe and held all 6 climbers, preventing them from falling into the Godwin-Austen Glacier. This heroic act became known in the mountaineering world as the belay. Then they lost Art Gilkey on the way down, and the team finally arrived with terribly frostbitten limbs at the base camp. Arthur Carr Gilkey, a geologist, was only 26 years old when he fell to death on August 10, 1953. Some say he was swept away by an avalanche, and other members of the team firmly believe that he released himself from the ropes to spare his teammates from further risk on his behalf. On the team's descent to base camp, a memorial cairn was erected for Art Gilkey, and a service was held. The Gilkey Memorial has since become the burial place of other climbers who have died on K2, as well as a memorial to those whose bodies have not been found. Gilkey's remains were discovered in 1993 by a British expedition, melting out of the glacier at the base of the south face of K2. The account of the expedition, written by Bates and Houston, with additional sections by the other climbers, was published in 1954. Named K2 the Savage Mountain, the book received widespread acclaim and is regarded as a mountaineering classic. K2 is also often referred to as the King of Mountains. The Mountaineer's Mountain is another well-known nickname. Furthermore, the world's second highest peak has the reputation to be the Mountain of Mountains, after the title of prominent Italian climber Reinhold Messner's book about climbing K2, published in 1980. Reinhold Messner, who was the first mountaineer to climb all 14 8,000-meter peaks, said that while he had great respect for the 1954 Italian team that first climbed K2, he had even more respect for the 1953 American team, adding that while they failed in the most beautiful way you can imagine. Napoleon Hill once said, "The starting point of all achievement is desire." If climbers desire to climb K2, obviously, they first need to reach the starting point of every summit attempt, namely, the base camp. Arriving at the base camp requires mastering a long journey full of challenges. Expeditions usually assemble in Rawalpindi, on the outskirts of Islamabad, and prepare for traveling to the small town of Skardu. They either drive a large portion of the 1,300 kilometers, or 808 miles long Karakoram highway, or take a 1-hour domestic flight. As a prerequisite for the trek to the K2 base camp, foreigners must hire a licensed guide and also obtain a no objection certificate from the tourism office in Skardu. From Skardu, The journey continues on board four-wheel drive off-road SUVs. After a 6 to 9 hour drive, during which the teams have no choice but to follow dangerous mountain tracks with washed-away portions of dirt roads, try to cross flooded rivers, and risk landslides and rockfalls, they finally reach the village of Ascoli, located at an altitude of 3,000 meters. In Ascoli, the complete camping and climbing gear, food for 2 months, and other necessary items get distributed to porters, who carry a maximum load of 25 kilograms each. Also, a sufficient number of mules take part in the trek. The last stage of the journey is a 125 kilometers, or 78-mile-long trek, which usually lasts 8 to 9 days. The K2 base camp trek is categorized as a wilderness trekking experience that requires participants to be very comfortable with remote trekking, wilderness camping, and long days of hiking on a multi-day basis on uneven terrain. On the route, expeditions cross the 58 kilometers long Baltoro Glacier and make a halt at the next designated campsite at 4,000 meters, located just opposite the Trango Towers. The Trango Towers are a family of several rock towers, including the Great Trango Tower with its summit at 6,286 meters or 20,623 feet. The east face of this mighty rock features the world's greatest nearly vertical drop. The towers offer some of the largest cliffs and most challenging rock climbing. Concordia is undoubtedly one of the most spectacular places on our planet. Expeditions can stand here within 24 kilometers of no fewer than 4 8,000ers and 10 of the world's 30 highest peaks. All trekking groups camp here at approximately 4,500 meters, on a moraine ridge surrounded by jagged mountains. The view of K2 from Concordia is indescribably beautiful. Before finally arriving at the destination, one last stop is usually made at the Broad Peak Camp. Standing on this campsite and absorbing the majestic beauty of K2 is one of the highlights of this long and difficult trek.
We hope you liked this video and also will watch part 2 of this miniseries about K2. We would very much appreciate it if you consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and giving a thumbs up. We value your opinion and look forward to reading your comments. Thank you for watching.